How's it going, everyone? It's your man Lost Disciple, the voice box of the underground YouTube. If you watch my video on the Source Engine and its overwhelming feeling of nostalgia, you may recall something about a term called canopsia and the effect it has on the human psyche. And as an example, I use my childhood fear of Minecraft, and that feeling of something out of the ordinary just jumping out at me to shake me in my boots. Even Minecraft. Yes, Minecraft. If you felt this feeling before, then you know exactly what I mean. When I was younger, I actually used to get scared of playing specifically Minecraft Java by myself because I had no one else to play with, so I had no choice but to play the game alone, and I would always feel like something was in the game just watching me. Now I'm not talking about Herobrine or creepers creeping up behind me. No, I was afraid of some surreal creature just popping out at me and scaring the fuck out of me. Well, apparently after a discussion with a few of you and a couple of my friends, it turns out that I wasn't the only person that had this irrational fear. After doing some research as to why and what made people feel this way, I came to a realization and I figured that I should elaborate a bit more on this topic. But before we get started, I would like to show love to some of my supporters, most notably I'm Trash YouTuber and Stinkfly, and my close friend Pressure, or who I call Kyle, whose channel you should definitely check out, link in bio. Now without any further holdups, allow me to explain why I'm afraid of Minecraft. Okay, for starters, I'm gonna have to explain the term canopsia once more for the people that haven't watched my source video. Which, it's okay, it's not like I'm hurt or upset about it or anything, but you should definitely check it out after you finish watching this video. And to not sound like a broken record, I'll add some spice to the explanation and go a little bit more into detail about the effects canopsia has on us. Canopsia is a term as defined by the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows to mean the eerie, forlorn atmosphere of a place that's usually bustling with people but it's now abandoned and quiet. A school hallway in the evening, an unlit office on a weekend, vacant fairgrounds, an emotional afterimage that makes it seem not just empty but hyper empty, with the total population in the negative. Before, I used the example of the Backrooms creepypasta to help give you guys an idea of what it means. Now, as this was a good example to use, I know a lot of you guys would benefit from seeing an actual example that can occur in real life. Growing up, me and my buddies would go inside abandoned buildings to explore the area and just see the history of the building. A lot of the times, the places we went inside still had items inside. For example, the town we grew up in was a very wealthy town in the old days of America, and was actually the wealthiest city in New England during the time the Industrial Revolution and textile mills took off here in the States. The town I grew up in was specialized in particularly textile mills, and if you're knowledgeable at both American history and geography, you may have already guessed Norwich, Connecticut. In which, my friend, you are correct. Anyway, as time went on, the textile mills no longer served much purpose. The owners of the buildings do what every other wealthy property owner does when they no longer need their properties. They sell them off to be used for a greater purpose. Yeah, no, instead they just abandoned them and everything inside the buildings and left them there to build up overdue taxes and become neighborhood eyesores. And for those asking why this is, well, that's because it's actually more expensive to demolish the building than it is to just let it sit there. Nonetheless, when me and my friends got bored, we would go inside these buildings just to get a feel for the history inside the buildings and to see if we could find anything spooky. But all we found was a bunch of papers with people's social security numbers and other personal information, squatters, and some caution signs with a funny word called asbestos on it. The first time exploring these buildings, it gave off this kind of feeling that something was just lurking in the shadows in the deepest parts of the warehouse, stalking us until we were vulnerable to strike. Or even the feeling of stumbling into some jigsaw scenario where we would have to compete in some deranged activities in order to escape with our lives. But as I'm here to tell the tale, you can tell I'm the one that made it out alive. Back then, we had no explanation as to why we felt as such when we explored these types of areas and environments, but today I now know that is due to canopsia. But canopsia doesn't really explain why we thought some of these crazy beings was going to attack us. Rather, it explains the eerie feeling we felt while spelunking these now abandoned buildings. What I mean is, the eerie feeling is from the fact that these rooms we were walking around in actually had hundreds of workers in them sweating their heinies off and possibly losing a couple fingers to now being completely empty with cobwebs and graffiti all over the place. However, like I said, that eerie feeling doesn't come from the fact that we thought the swamp man was going to rise out of a sewer grate and drag us down to the sewage dimension. That is actually due to a different phenomena altogether. But the latter eerie feeling is what made the backrooms creepy in the first place. It wasn't the thought that a monster was inhabiting the rooms and hunting you down as you wandered them. It was the thought that you could be endlessly wandering around this massive open space that once had or should have been bustling with people. Now, to relate things back to Minecraft, the game itself isn't unsettling at all. besides from a few ambient noises that try to give you a quick scare, but the eerie feeling comes from the fact that you're exploring a massive open world with only you and a handful of soulless NPCs inhabiting that same space with you. But in the video, I mentioned that I was afraid of some surreal image or creature that didn't belong in the game suddenly popping out at me and scaring me. But that feeling there isn't canopsia. So what exactly is it? Well, my friends, the answer goes back to the good old human nature and how our consciousness and subconsciousness works. Disclaimer, I am not a psychology teacher, so I can't completely explain the phenomena that is human psyche, but I can give a brief lesson on how I understand how it works. An Austrian neurologist by the name of Sigmund Freud, or Freud, pretty sure it's Freud, breaks down the human consciousness into 3 levels of awareness: consciousness, pre-consciousness, and unconscious. These ideas also correspond to his idea of the id, ego, and superego. You may have studied these back in high school like I did. Now, this is where things may get a little confusing, which is understandable because human nature and the way our brains work is super complex, so just trying to understand it makes you sound like you escaped the loony bin. Unconsciousness is the operations that our brain takes to below our level of conscious awareness. They use this to explain things like our sudden emotions and phobias that we cannot understand. A grand example of this is trypophobia, or the fear of holes and patterns, such as a honeycomb or holes in the ground made by burrowing animals or insects. As a kid, I used to think this was a fake phobia because I didn't understand how you could be afraid of holes. Maybe the creatures that made the holes, yeah, that's understandable, but the holes themselves? I just thought that was bizarre. But turns out that's a real phobia, and like I mentioned prior, the people with such phobias just can't explain what it is that makes them feel that way. Now, our preconsciousness is kind of like how RAM cards work for a computer. It's data, or in this case, thoughts or memories that are stored away but not completely discarded and pop up when needed. An example would be if you have to get cheese from the grocery store, and you go to the store and you grab everything you needed from the store, and you almost forgot about the cheese until you walk past the cheese, see it on a sign, or even hear someone mention something remotely similar to cheese, and your brain goes, oh yeah, don't forget the whole reason why you came here was to buy cheese. And then you go and purchase said cheese. And finally, our consciousness as well, everything that we're aware of when it comes to external and internal stimuli, such as our feelings of hunger, thirst, sleepiness, and even our range of emotions such as happiness, anger, or sadness, and even our active and inactive thoughts. But like I mentioned previously, when it comes to psychology, it isn't that simple. You see, we also have this state of subconsciousness, which is usually grouped together with our consciousness. And this is a place where things like our natural skills like breathing, driving, tying our shoes, and memories that we don't even remember we remember. You know what else is stored in our subconsciousness? Our beliefs, desires, irrational thoughts, and the one that's most important with the topic we're talking about today, our fears. Yes, our fears are stored in the subconscious part of our conscious mind. For those of you that don't relate to my fear, allow me to use myself as an example, and if you can relate to me, you might start to see the correlation. When I was younger, at about maybe 7 or 8, I was watching the first Child's Play movie with my mom. Well, during the movie, my mother had fell asleep and left the movie on for me to watch alone, and being so young, that movie scarred me for life, and the idea of a doll coming to life and trying to kill me was terrifying. Obviously, nothing as such could happen in reality, but when you're at a young, impressionable age, that stuff seems realer than the reality we live in. And I used to watch a lot of scary films and videos on YouTube that led to me having these stupid irrational fears. Another example is, I used to be afraid of clowns, because of the famous Stephen King It clown. And no, not the reboot. I'm talking about the OG that aired on TV. That episodic series had me so shook. I used to be afraid to walk home from my friend's house, which was only a block away, because I thought Pennywise would pull up in a clown car and spin the block on me and feast on my corpse. Another I know everyone had was either one of these 3. Being afraid to shower and wash your hair because you thought when you opened your eyes a ghost was going to pop out and get you. Looking away from the mirror and looking back to see something that wasn't there when you first were looking in the mirror, or even running back to your room for safety after you turned off your lights. Now, I can keep listing off these fears, but I think you guys get the idea. Now that we're older, we look back on these fears and laugh at ourselves because our childhood innocence was, well, innocent. And we thought things like this would really happen to us, and we acted with caution. Even today, these thoughts still inhabit our subconscious mind, and sometimes they find a way to creep out of the depths of our brain and remind us of the state of fear that it once had us in. Hell, for me personally, while I may not be afraid of those things anymore, they definitely evolved into 2 of my biggest fears today. The fear of being chased, and the worst of all, I have a fear of items or people being in places that they shouldn't belong. I have 2 examples. One day I was walking to school in the morning, and it was still a little dark because the sun was just starting to rise, and I had to walk through this short path in the woods. And as I was walking, I had seen what I thought was an old antique vase just sitting there in the middle of the woods. And believe me, when I tell you I almost died from the panic and shock my mind was going through, I literally froze in fear. But as I analyzed the vase for a while, I noticed that it was just a skunk with his tail up, ready to spray me if I took another step. Once I realized that, I just kind of brushed it off and kept it moving. There was also a night I was hanging out with these two girls, and we were driving around smoking, and we came up on a road that had a box in the middle of the road. Reminder, it's like 1 a.m. and there's just a box sitting in the middle of this dark-ass road. So they start freaking out, asking me what to do. They didn't know, but internally I was dying inside because this situation is so unusual that it had me creep the hell out. And to act brave and macho, I just calmly told them to just drive around it and forget about it. And after we did that, we all just kind of laughed it off. But now that I'm older, I learned that's actually a tactic people use to rob people and get them out of their cars. Nonetheless, these irrational fears I had as a kid may have subsided, but they also turned into two new fears that I still have till this day. And when I was a kid, Minecraft was the perfect environment for these fears to manifest. Even though I knew a scarily realistic version of Cosmo and Wanda or Squidward's suicide wasn't just going to suddenly disrupt my mining trip, it was just a combination of canopsia and irrational childhood fears from watching all the scary content that I consumed. It just got the better of me when I was in those types of environments. And that, my fellow viewers, was why I was afraid of Minecraft. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. As always, don't forget to show your support, and if you're new around here, feel free to become a part of the Disciple family and hit that subscribe button. Maybe you guys have some fears that you would like to talk about, and all you gotta do is comment them down below and vent it out, and see if me or anyone else can relate to you. As always, I'm your man Lost Disciple, and I will see you in the next video. Peace out.
Television, fan on the ceiling, abstract art on the walls, living different. 1989, talking on the phone, wind blowing hard, all the windows closed. Turquoise sheets, pink pillows, Motel 6, that's room 24. Meet you in the morning, meet me here tonight. Vibrating bed, gotta say it alright. Black marble sink, gold in the faucets, fresh bar soap, many shampoo bottles. Playing some Atari, she blowing on my cartridge. Room service knocking, I can hear him at the door. Do not disturb, hanging